With his skull throbbing from bone-crushing G-forces, Lieutenant Nolan Johnson yanked his fighter into a barrel roll, narrowly evading a stream of white-hot plasma from an Andromedan starfighter. Earth's desperate last-ditch secret weapon had to work, or humanity dies. Johnson's squadron dueled the alien ships in Saturn's rings, sparks and shrapnel, flying as railguns and plasma cannons traded fire at relativistic speeds. For 5 long years, the technologically superior Galactic Andromedan Empire had pounded Earth's meager defenses, slowly crushing humanity's crumbling resistance. 9-foot-tall Emperor Primus sneered at holographic displays on his flagship's bridge, 4 blue arms crossed in smug satisfaction. Once Earth finally fell, he would enslave its population and strip the planet bare. Just a few human insects remained to be swatted. His victory was inevitable. But back on Earth, in a classified underground bunker, physicist Dr. Ethan Reeves put the final touches on a revolutionary weapon, humanity's last shred of hope to survive. As Johnson's battered ship screamed through the atmosphere and touched down, he prayed this new technology could do the impossible and save the human race from extinction. Nolan felt his stomach lurch as the battered fighter touched down on the landing pad. He'd pushed the ship to its limits during that last skirmish, and the fact that he'd made it to the bunker was a small miracle. The rest of his squadron set down their crafts in tight formation, and they hopped out to see Dr. Reeves rushing towards them. The aging scientist had a glimmer in his eyes and a grin that looked out of place given the circumstances. "Lieutenant Johnson, thank goodness you made it. We've had a breakthrough. Please follow me." Nolan and his pilots were led through winding underground corridors, passing by dozens of grim-faced personnel. They entered a cavernous hangar, and the squadron stopped in their tracks, awestruck by the sight before them. A dozen obsidian-black ships were lined up in perfect rows. Nolan had never seen fighters like them. They were shaped like arrowheads, with smooth contours that suggested they were built for speed and stealth. Dr. Reeves spread his arms wide. "Gentlemen, I present to you the Spectre-class fighters, equipped with our latest innovation, the Quantum Fold Drive. This technology allows for instantaneous jumps to any point in the galaxy without relying on the wormhole network." Nolan's brow furrowed. "That's a game-changer, Doc, but how does it help us against the Andromedans?" The scientist's smile widened. "The QFD has another trick up its sleeve. It can generate temporary micro-wormholes, which can be used to deliver payloads directly into enemy ships. In other words, you can bypass their shields entirely." The implications of this revelation sent a ripple of excitement through the squadron. For the first time in years, they had a weapon that could level the playing field against the technologically superior Andromedans. Dr. Reeves continued, "The Spectres are also equipped with state-of-the-art cloaking devices. You'll be virtually invisible to their sensors. We need you to use these ships to strike deep into the heart of the Andromedan Empire. It's a daring mission, but it may be our only chance." Nolan and his pilots exchanged determined glances. They knew the risks, but they were ready to do whatever it took to save humanity. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Andromedan flagship, Emperor Primus slammed his fist on the console, his 4 eyes narrowed in rage. "How are these primitives still resisting? We should have crushed them by now." General Zorgax, a battle-scarred veteran, stepped forward. "Your Highness, I have a plan. We launch a massive coordinated assault on their major cities and military installations. We'll overwhelm them with sheer numbers and firepower." Primus leaned back in his throne, considering the proposal. "Very well, General. Mobilize the fleet. I want every last human wiped out. It's time to end this once and for all." As the Andromedan Armada began to move, their ships blotting out the stars, Nolan and his squadron prepared for their secret mission. They knew the odds were stacked against them, but with the Quantum Fold Drive and the Spectre fighters, they finally had a chance to strike back and save Earth from annihilation. Nolan gripped the control stick of his Spectre fighter, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. This was it, the moment Phantom Squadron had been training for. He glanced at the determined faces of his wingmen on the comm screen, giving a curt nod. "All right, Phantoms, let's give these Andromedan bastards a wake-up call they won't forget." With a deep breath, Nolan activated the quantum fold drive. Reality seemed to stretch and distort around him, stars blurring into streaks of light. In an instant, the inky void of space snapped back into focus. But instead of the familiar sight of Earth's solar system, Nolan found himself staring at the pulsing blue engines of Andromedan battleships. "We're in," he reported, his voice steady. "Cloaking engaged. Commence attack run." Phantom Squadron fanned out, their obsidian ships melting into the darkness. They weaved through the Andromedan formation, unseen and unheard. Nolan locked onto a massive destroyer, its hull bristling with plasma cannons. He armed an antimatter torpedo and whispered a prayer. "Fox 3. The torpedo streaked from his ship, guided by the QFD's micro-wormhole. It vanished from sight, only to reappear an instant later, buried deep within the destroyer's hull. The resulting explosion was catastrophic. The destroyer's reactor went critical, setting off a chain reaction that tore the ship apart from the inside out. Similar scenes played out across the Andromedan rearguard, as Phantom Squadron struck with ruthless efficiency. Battleships and cruisers shuddered and broke apart, their crews consumed by the merciless vacuum of space. On the bridge of his flagship, Emperor Primus slammed his fists on the console, his face contorted with rage. "What is happening?" he bellowed. "How are the humans doing this?" His advisors scrambled to provide answers, their multiple eyes wide with fear. One of them, a trembling lieutenant, spoke up. "Your Highness, we're detecting strange energy signatures. It appears the humans have developed some kind of new wormhole technology." Primus's eyes narrowed. Impossible. They're primitives. They couldn't have made such a leap in such a short time. He pointed a clawed finger at the lieutenant. "Find out how they did this, now, and tighten security across the fleet. I want every ship on high alert." Back on Earth, Dr. Reeves pored over the data streaming in from Phantom Squadron's ships, his face illuminated by the glow of holographic displays. His team worked feverishly, analyzing the readings and making adjustments to the QFD algorithms. "Look at this," he said, eyes widening. "If we link multiple QFD drives together, we can create larger, more stable wormholes, big enough to move entire fleets." His colleagues murmured in astonishment. This changed everything. Dr. Reeves turned to a nearby UEDF officer. "We need to start retrofitting every ship we have with this technology. It's our chance to turn the tide." As word of Phantom Squadron's success spread, a newfound sense of hope began to grow among the ranks of Earth's beleaguered defenders. But in the halls of Andromedan power, paranoia and suspicion festered. Emperor Primus stalked the corridors of his flagship, his mind churning with dark thoughts. How had the humans gained such an advantage? It couldn't be just technological prowess. No, there had to be something more, something insidious. He summoned his inner circle, his voice dripping with venom. "We have traitors in our midst," he hissed. "Someone is feeding the humans information, helping them strike at our very heart." His generals exchanged nervous glances, each fearing the Emperor's wrath. Primus's eyes darted from one face to another, searching for any hint of disloyalty. "I want them found, and I want them executed. Publicly. As a message to anyone else who dares to betray me." As the Andromedan leadership began to turn on itself, consumed by suspicion and fear, Nolan and Phantom Squadron continued their relentless campaign. They struck like ghosts, leaving chaos and destruction in their wake, chipping away at the once unassailable might of the Andromedan war machine. The tide was turning, but the war was far from over. The vanguard tore through the fabric of space, a gleaming silver spear at the head of the human armada. Shimmering wormholes flared to life around it as the fleet emerged from quantum space, their QFD drives linked in perfect synchronicity. On the bridge, Admiral Elena Vasquez stood tall, her eyes fixed on the holographic displays showing the Andromedan fleet arrayed before them. "All ships engage warp jammers," she commanded, her voice steady. "Fighters, prepare for launch." The jamming field snapped into place, blanketing the battlefield and rendering the Andromedan sensors all but useless. The alien ships scrambled to regroup, their formations fracturing as confusion rippled through their ranks. In the hangar bay of the Vanguard, Nolan and Phantom Squadron stood ready beside their Spectre fighters, suited up and armed for battle. The deck shuddered as the first salvos were exchanged, the distant booms of missile impacts and energy weapons echoing through the ship. "This is it, Phantoms," Nolan said, his voice crackling over the comm. "We get one shot at this, let's make it count." He climbed into the cockpit of his fighter, the sleek black craft humming to life around him. The hangar doors yawned open, revealing the chaos of the battle raging outside. "Phantom leader to all units," he called out. "Punch it!" The Spectre fighters leaped from the hangar, their QFD drives flashing as they vanished into the fray. They emerged moments later in the heart of the Andromedan formation, their cloaking devices rendering them all but invisible. On the bridge of the Andromedan flagship, Emperor Primus slammed his fist against the arm of his command chair, his face contorted with rage. "How are they doing this?" he snarled, his eyes darting across the tactical displays. "Where did they come from?" "Your Highness," one of his advisors stammered, "the humans, they're using some kind of new wormhole technology. Our sensors can't lock onto them." Primus rose to his feet, his four eyes blazing with fury. "I want every ship we have converging on that human fleet," he growled. "Overwhelm them with numbers. Crush them." The Andromedan ships surged forward, their weapons unleashing a storm of fire against the human vessels. The Vanguard shuddered under the onslaught, its shields flaring as they absorbed the brunt of the attack. But the humans were ready. The QFD-equipped ships danced through the battlefield, using their micro-wormholes to blink in and out of existence, always one step ahead of the enemy fire. They targeted the Andromedan ships with ruthless precision, their weapons finding weak points in the alien armor, and tearing them apart from the inside out. In the midst of the chaos, Nolan and Phantom Squadron made their move. They jumped their fighters directly into the hangar bay of Primus's flagship, catching the Andromedan guards completely off guard. Pulse rifles barked, and energy blades flashed as the humans fought their way through the ship, their augmented strength and speed more than a match for the alien defenders. They burst onto the bridge, weapons leveled at the stunned Andromedans. Primus whirled to face them, his expression a mix of shock and rage. "Surrender, Primus!" Nolan called out, his rifle aimed squarely at the Emperor's chest. "It's over." But Primus only laughed, a harsh grating sound that sent chills down Nolan's spine. "You think you've won, human?" he sneered. "You have no idea what you're up against." He tapped a command into the console before him, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "I've just sent the activation signal for our superweapon," he said. "In a matter of minutes, your precious Earth will be nothing but a cloud of dust and echoes." Nolan felt his blood run cold, his grip tightening on his rifle. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and time was running out. Nolan's heart raced as he stared down the barrel of his rifle at Emperor Primus. The weight of the galaxy hung in the balance. "Where is it, Primus? Where's the superweapon?" Primus sneered, his four eyes glinting with malice. "You're too late, human. The Star Reaper will fire and your precious Earth will be nothing but dust." Nolan pressed the rifle harder against Primus's chest. "Give me the coordinates, now." The Emperor's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from his body. He looked around at the ruins of his once mighty flagship, his empire crumbling before his very eyes. With a resigned sigh, he tapped a series of numbers into the console. "There, the Star Reaper is hidden in the Xyrax Nebula, but it won't matter. You'll never reach it in time." Nolan relayed the coordinates to Admiral Ivanova, his voice urgent over the comm. "Admiral, we have the location of the superweapon. It's called the Star Reaper, hidden in the Xyrax Nebula." Ivanova's voice crackled back, the sounds of battle raging in the background. "Understood, Lieutenant. We're still engaged with the Andromedan fleet, but I have a plan. We'll use the QFD to jump a team directly onto the Star Reaper. They'll have to disable it from within." Nolan glanced at his team, their faces grim but determined. "Admiral, I volunteer to lead the mission. My team and I will get it done." There was a pause on the other end of the line. It's a one-way trip, Lieutenant. You understand that, don't you? Nolan swallowed hard, his grip tightening on his rifle. I understand, Admiral, but it's the only way. Very well. Godspeed, Lieutenant. Nolan turned to his team, his voice steady. All right, Phantoms, you heard the Admiral. We're jumping to the Xyrax Nebula. We're going to take out that superweapon, no matter the cost. They nodded, their eyes shining with a mix of fear and determination. They knew the stakes, and they were ready to lay down their lives for humanity. As the battle raged around them, Nolan and his hand-picked team of soldiers and engineers strapped into their Spectre fighters. The hangar bay shook with the impact of enemy fire, the deck lurching beneath their feet. "Punch it!" Nolan yelled, and the fighters leaped into the void, their QFD drives flashing as they vanished into the nebula. They emerged in the heart of the Xyrax Nebula, the swirling gases and dust clouds obscuring their vision. But there, nestled in the center of the maelstrom, was the Star Reaper. It was a monstrous construction, a sphere of black metal bristling with weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. "There it is," Nolan breathed, his eyes wide. "Let's get to work." They landed their fighters on the surface of the installation, the magnetic clamps locking them in place. Nolan and his team disembarked, their weapons at the ready. "We'll have to fight our way in," he said, his voice grim. "Stay sharp and watch each other's backs." They pushed forward, fighting through layers of automated defenses and Andromedan security forces. The corridors of the Star Reaper rang with the sounds of gunfire and the screams of the dying. Nolan felt a searing pain in his side as an energy bolt found its mark, burning through his armor. He stumbled, his vision blurring, but he pushed on, his team rallying around him. They fought their way deeper into the installation, the resistance growing fiercer with every step. Nolan watched in horror as his teammates fell, cut down by the relentless Andromedan defenders. Finally, they reached the control room, the heart of the Star Reaper. Nolan staggered to the central console, his blood leaving a trail on the deck behind him. "It's charging up," one of the engineers shouted, his face pale. "We're out of time." Nolan looked at the console, his vision swimming. He knew what he had to do. "Get out of here," he said, his voice ragged. "Get back to the fleet." "Sir, we can't leave you." "That's an order, soldier. Go, I'll handle this." The survivors of his team reluctantly fell back, their faces etched with grief. Nolan watched them go, a sad smile on his lips. He turned back to the console, his fingers flying over the controls. He could feel the power of the Star Reaper surging beneath his hands, the weapon preparing to fire. With a final desperate effort, he overloaded the power core, the console exploding in a shower of sparks and flames. The Star Reaper shuddered, the lights flickering and dying as the chain reaction spread through its systems. Nolan closed his eyes, a sense of peace washing over him. He had done it. Earth was safe. Humanity would survive. The Star Reaper exploded in a blinding flash of light, the shockwave rippling out through the nebula. On the bridge of the Vanguard, Admiral Ivanova watched in silence as the sensors registered the destruction of the superweapon. "It's done," she said softly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Lieutenant Johnson did it." The Andromedan fleet, upon learning of the Star Reaper's destruction and their Emperor's capture, finally signaled their surrender. The battle was over. The war was won. But the cost had been high. As the fleet began the long journey back to Earth, Admiral Ivanova looked out at the stars, her heart heavy with the weight of the lives lost. Lieutenant Nolan Johnson, a hero of the UEDF, a savior of humanity. His sacrifice and the sacrifices of all those who had fallen would never be forgotten. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.